Andrew Fagan, welcome to the Sound Studio. It's been a while since I last saw you, but we've known each other on and off for a few years.
Indeed.
Now then, this is the one that, and I have to say, this is the first book that I came upon. Swirly World, The Solo Voyages, read that. The new one comes out, Swirly World Lost at Sea. So I immediately went back to the first one to catch up with you and that sort of thing. When you first went out in Swirly World and you decided to take on the ocean at large, you had no idea where you were going. The preparation level was not as high.
No, well, I was 23 when I first bought the boat.
Yeah.
So I bought Swirly World, its full name, Swirly World in Perpetuity, in 1985. And my whole ambition was to sail offshore solo. Like
Yep.
I'd read all the books.
Why? What was it that drove you to that?
Well, I learnt to sail when I was 12 in Wellington, Evans Bay. I'm surprised I persevered because it was so windy. Wellington was just a shocker for the amount of days that racing was cancelled. But while I was doing that, I raced competitively, like P classes and Starlings and Junior Cherries and Paper Tigers, with a generation that came through. Russell Coots was the same period as me. So you'd sort of be racing against people like that at regattas and things. But while I was doing that, I was reading the books about solo sailing as a teenager.
Yeah.
And there were some really there were some great ones. Adrian Hayter, it's called Sheila in the Wind, a New Zealand guy who after World War II didn't know anything about sailing, and he sailed this 32-foot boat from England to New Zealand. It took him 7 years.
Wow.
And it's amazing. Wow. Yeah, it's quite a he stopped in places and things, but it's just outrageous endurance that he had, I mean, the way he got away with it. There's lots of other books like that. Another big one was South Sea Vagabonds by Johnny Ray. That's pretty famous. That was initially for him. He went to Sunday Island, which is now called Rowell Island in the Kermadec group.
Yes.
600 miles northeast of Auckland, New Zealand dependency. Just a weather station there. That's all.
Really?
That's all that's there. Yeah. And he went there in his book, and that's why I wanted to go there too. Really, it was just to sort of copy what his inspirational sailing had been like.
Yeah.
So I didn't have GPS, for example. GPS, it's hard to believe now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it was 1986 when I did my first offshore trip, and it was a sextant. That's what I used a sextant.
Old fashioned.
Sorry,
old school.
Old school. You can still do it.
Can you still do it?
Yeah, I did actually. Like on this last trip, which didn't quite work out the way I planned.
We haven't got there. We haven't got there. Yeah, hang on to the good stuff.
I used the I took the sextant with me, even though I had 3 GPSs now. But I took so I still can do it. It's it's quite tricky. You've got to have a book of tables with all the sort of mathematical stuff in it, and then but it's just you have to take it. Basically, a sextant takes gives you an angle from the sun or the moon, but I've only done the sun sites down to the horizon.
Yeah.
So you get this, and you have to get the exact time, Greenwich Mean Time.
Yeah.
And then you work all the calculations from that, and that gives you a line of position. And over the course of a day, once you've travelled a few miles, the sun obviously changes where it is.
So you've got to reset.
So you've got different lines of lines of position.
Yep.
So in the end, you end up with basically 3 lines of position, which is like a triangle, and you're somewhere inside that triangle, depending on how accurate.
Somewhere inside that. See, thank God for GPS.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's unbelievable now. It's too easy.
So let's fast forward quickly to the Swirly World Lost at Sea, which is the latest book, which starts out with the concept of Guinness Book of Records and setting a record.
The Swirly World, just by nature of its size, obviously, is 17 feet. Actually 16 feet 10 inches long,
right?
Which is about 5 meters, so it's really small. And so when I sailed the boat to Australia back in 94, there's a thing called the Solo Tasman Race, which is that first book sort of takes up most of that, from New Plymouth to Mooloolaba, which was just north of Brisbane. So I did that. So I got the record for the smallest boat to have sailed there and back.
So you're already in the record book.
So yeah, for that, just because the boat, the size of it, And then in 2007, I sailed the boat around New Zealand. I went down to the Auckland Islands and then up the west coast. So, and that's the smallest boat to have done that. So it's sort of, and I've got a lot of done a lot of miles on the boat.
Yeah.
And I just, again, with my reading, I've always aspired to going around the world or going a lot further. So that's why I had a go at it, and just by virtue of the boat being so small, it would have been the smallest to go around if I'd been successful. The smallest at the moment is a 20-foot boat. A Polish guy sailed it out of London, again non-stop. It was about 270 days.
Yeah.
So that's what I was planning for. So I had 14 months worth of everything on board you could possibly need to stay alive. I had like a water maker, because the one big thing about freshwater is too heavy.
So the water maker, how does that work?
They call it reverse osmosis.
Yeah.
And it's just like a big grease gun, and you have a couple of pipes that go down over the side into the water, and then you start pumping it, and
I've got this terrific mental picture.
It brings up the water up the pipe, and then it forces it through this sort of membrane, which removes all the salt, and what you get left is just like literally it drips, and it's so slow.
Gee, how long does it take?
It took me, I got it down to a fine art. It took me 40 minutes to make 3 litres.
Wow.
Which isn't bad, and I was drinking 1.5 litres a day.
Yep.
500 mils for my freeze-dried food, which I had, because that's, again, weight, So I had 14 months of freeze-dried food, expiry date 2025.
So you've still got something?
No. I don't know where that is. But
hang on, is that all in the book? Because
that's all in this book.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm a third of the way through it. This book,
Right.
It's got the Lost at Sea bit, and it's. I've got to say, I'm not what you call a sailor. I don't care about sailing. Boats are things that I studiously avoid, because I went yachting once, and I was thinking, God, what if it capsizes? And it did. So I thought, well, that's it. I can't.
What sort of boat was it? It
was just a little thing on a lake.
Oh, like a centerboard.
Yeah. And it was just, and I thought, no, this isn't for me.
And
so
it's horrible. It can be quite traumatic when you capsize and you don't expect to.
I mean, I was like 20, and it just totally traumatized me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's not good.
So you're
sorry to hear that, Nick.
I'm not coming on your boat, Andrew. The thing about it, though, is the way you write and talk about leaving Auckland, leaving the safety of the pontoon, getting out to the station where you actually have to sign out legally to say that you're on your way.
Yeah,
was fascinating. I find it fascinating the way you talk about the wind shifts, what it does. You've got a way of talking to me about stuff that I really have no interest in, but it's a compelling way of reading it.
Good, because I obviously read a lot of these sort of books.
Yeah.
And I personally like the sailing detail.
Yep. Well, so do I, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
And it's just, what wind, what size the seas were, what sail you had up, how you're coping.
But also you put in there what it actually means. Like, when you talk about the size of the sea, why you've got a sail up, you actually detail it, and I understand it.
Good, because I tried to write the book for people that aren't sailors.
Perfect.
As well as people that are, you know. And just getting the sailing detail that I like, but not making it boring. It's very, I've read, so many of them. It can be pretty dry depending on how you present it.
But there is so much interest in there. We're talking about the 14 months worth of supplies you took with you. How you arranged that on the boat so that the boat didn't sink.
I just stuffed it all in.
It's one of those things you've really got to read it. It's an incredible
took me weeks.
It's
took me weeks to put it all in.
Absolutely brilliant. Like, I only realised that as far as I am in the book, it's just over 30 days at sea.
Right.
And we've got through the rough patches, and we're actually now at the point where, was it the skeg? Skeg has gone adrift.
Yeah,
and that completely stuffs up everything you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So don't give it away by telling me what happens next.
I won't. But it was most unfortunate. It's the most unfortunate outcome is probably the most diplomatic way of looking at it.
The interesting thing about it is, like, you're here, so to a certain extent you must have succeeded.
I've succeeded in saving myself.
Well done.
Hang
on, is Swirly World no longer with us?
No. Well, maybe it is. We just don't know.
Sorry, I'm going to have a moment.
No, I know. Well, tell me about it. It was 37 years I'd had the boat.
I know.
So it was it was an unfortunate outcome, but I was pushing the envelope. I knew, I was heading towards Cape Horn, and I got halfway to Cape Horn. It's 5,000 miles from Auckland. I got 2,500 miles, and it was going quite well, the whole thing, but we had a lot of bad weather. I don't. It's hard to explain to people, but like a higher latitude is more dangerous. For example, Auckland is 36 degrees south, but the Auckland Islands, which are subantarctic, south of Stewart Island,
Right.
they're like 50 degrees south.
Right.
So the further you go,
the worse it gets.
Yeah.
The Southern Ocean's famous for being like
so
traumatic in a small boat.
So I was I was on the edge of the Southern Ocean, the top edge. I was at about 42 degrees, which is about the latitude of Christchurch.
Yep.
And that was my plan, to just stay at that latitude until I got within 1,000 miles of the coast of South America, and then I was going to dive down. That's when you got to dive down, because Cape Horn is 56. It's a long way down there.
And it's one of those, I guess, mythical places, Cape Horn. You've heard about it for years.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the most treacherous bits.
Well, that's why I wanted to have a go at it,
Yeah.
And I've read, like I say, there was a Japanese guy as well who went round in the 1970s in a 20-foot yacht, not very dissimilar to Swirly World. And, he wrote about it, and he got completely rolled. But the thing about you capsizing on a centerboard is that you have to get it upright, because it won't. Whereas a keeler like Swirly World has got a big keel with weight in it, so that if you do capsize,
it'll pull itself up.
Yeah, that's the difference,
So with the boat in the ocean where you are at the moment, there is a nice transgression as well, because clearly where I'm up to in the book, something's going to happen, and then we backtrack to the story of a trimaran. It was moored next to Swirly World, and that is a hell of a story about a guy called Michael who appropriated the boat that you actually bought, but not off him. You bought it off the owner, but then he, I won't say stole, he moved it for you.
Well, he did, and he had a reputation for doing that. And it was a funny story, but it was quite bizarre,
Yeah.
When I found him on the boat, just sitting there, he was sitting upright.
Yep.
And it was like, whoa, well, dude, what's going on? Who are you?
This is my boat.
Yeah. He said, no, this is my boat. And it was like...
So, I mean, you covered off quite nicely, but was there any tense moments? Was there a moment where you thought...
Yeah, I didn't trust him at all.
Yeah.
When I got onto the boat, because it's a big trimaran, 36 feet long and 20 foot wide.
Yeah.
So he was like sitting in the cockpit, and I was in my dinghy, and I sort of stopped, and I thought, this is a good idea to get on this boat with this guy or not, because I didn't know him from a bar of soap, know. But I got onto the boat and kind of verbally had a go at him, and he just sort of kept absorbing it, and he just kept on denying. He said, "Oh, mate, I'm really sorry. I thought it was my mate's boat." Or, he was just bullshitting the whole way through it, But but it was a bit weird, because I thought, well, I'm really giving this guy a real good reason to hate me.
Yeah.
At the moment, and I thought I had my guard up. I thought, geez, this guy could just have a go at me
anytime.
Right now. Yeah, And if you're in the water, it's a different story, But I got away with that one.
We won't go into any more details of that, because I urge you to read the book. It is a brilliant read. I'm only a third of the way through it, and this is how far I've gotten to the story. There is later on, there's an altercation. Well, it's not an altercation. It's a meeting of Andrew and a rather large container vessel. That's a question I've got for you. When you're traveling out there, and you get the real sense of you're alone in the ocean, you hear things about containers that have fallen overboard, things like that. So that there's an ever-present danger in the water of stuff you can't even see.
Yeah, potentially, but you weigh that up with the fact that there's a lot of water out there. It's a long way, it's just sea, and you'd be most unlucky if you hit. You're talking about containers, and quite often they do come off ships and they do float before they sink. I mean, there was a terrible one a few years ago where New Zealand Air Force were flying up to Fiji, and a container ship had lost something like 20 containers.
That's right, yeah.
And they saw them all. They saw them just, and so if you hit something like that on a windy night, you're in trouble. But when you're going as slow as I go, you might just bounce off it, or you know what I mean?
Yep.
You might fracture the boat, or you might not. But, if you're in a, America's Cup foiling boat,
That'd be all
carbon
over.
fiber doing 50 knots.
Yeah, she's done.
Yeah. And
She's
people,
done.
people do race around the world on big boats like that.
Yeah.
I think I'd feel more vulnerable going fast than I do in little boats going slow.
One thing I did pick up in the book so far is it's a bit of a love story as well. There's you and this boat called Swirly World that you have a really close relationship with it.
Well, I've had it for so long.
Yeah.
Well, I had it for so long. And you sort of take for granted it's just something that, it's just a possession, maybe like a car that someone had or things. But I think also the fact that it's taken me to so many places.
Yeah.
And I've been through so much bad weather, or lots of good weather too. But you've been through quite a few scary situations, wind induced,
Yeah.
bad weather. There's obviously a big connection with the boat, and I've done a lot of work to it over the years. I mean, I've neglected it as well. I mean, a lot of boats, when you look at boats on moorings around the harbours, all they do is sit there,
Yeah.
and grow weeds and maybe get a couple of weeks over Christmas, or, a lot of boats just don't get used, and I've been guilty of that too, where it's like the trimaran
Yeah.
story, where you, because of circumstances in your life, you can't perhaps, get away and
seemed like a good idea at the time.
And do what you want. But like I'd managed with this trip, where it all went wrong, was that I'd managed to organise my life to have 14 months with no responsibilities. Goodbye world,
How tough was that? How tough was that planning that, organising it, knowing that you had to block out that much time?
It took years, basically. It took years of accumulating all the gear, because it was expensive too. There's about 30 grand worth of stuff on the boat. It was just took years of slowly putting it together. Also, I had a lot of false starts and false hopes with sponsorship. Trying.
Yeah, that's tough, isn't it?
Trying to get people. I mean, that's a big part of this book too. I've gone into detail, so people can sort of see what it takes, I guess, to a degree. But people weren't really interested in sponsoring. I got a couple of sponsors, but not on the scale where some people give you money or.
But it's almost like some people would be interested if they knew you were going to crash or hit something like that. Then it would take on a whole different thing. But for you, the idea was to be able to do it.
Yeah, I just wanted to get out there. It was to have that time, because I really like being out there. Primarily, that was why I was doing it. It was couched in, okay, it'll be the smallest boat to have had a go, so maybe I'll get the record. But it was really about the sailing, and having all that time to be able to go out there and to sail through such amazingly historical pieces of water. Indian Ocean, it was all lined up. I had all the charts, I had everything set, and it was something that I've always wanted to do, but not necessarily in a bigger boat, because I find a lot of normal size yachts, with full standing headroom, for example. I mean, you can only sit in Swirly World. That's it.
There's some great pictures.
But like I find bigger and sort of normal, 40-foot or 35-foot yachts. Not as compelling. I think I really like it's the responsiveness and the closeness to the water, I think, with a smaller boat, that's more compelling to me.
So here's the big question now. Is there going to be a replacement for Swirly World? Is there more plans?
Yeah, well, that is the big question. I thought when I got back, I thought about building another version of the boat, but it's very expensive, And then when you look, it's basically a 70 grand exercise. And then if you look at, well, what else is available for 70 grand, boat wise, you can get a really big, nice boat for, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it doesn't have the same character.
It doesn't. Well, this is the whole thing. Then it really made me question myself and think, well, why was I doing it in that boat?
Yeah.
And it's because that's the only boat I've ever had, really, and I was used to it, and I knew it backwards, so I was confident, in the boat. One might say unwarranted confidence now, but I'll leave that to you to decide.
So we're looking at a triple threat career. You've got sailing, which you're incredibly good at, writing, which is stunning in this book.
No,
It's
thank you.
compelling.
Thank
And
you.
of course, we all know you from the Mockers, the musician that you are. So what's next?
I don't really know. I sort of take it as it comes. I mean, planning wise, I mean, the Mockers. I've got another band, Fagan and the People, and we're practicing. That's been. I mean, there's a Facebook page for that and stuff, and I mean that's sort of my material that since the Mockers that I've written. You know, like the last album came out, Act Normal, in 2020.
Yep.
And so, and we're actually playing, I think we're playing a gig in November, somewhere like the Whammy Bar or something like that, you know. So I'm sort of always doing that, you know.
I see a summer festival coming up, the Buy Andrew a Boat Summer Festival.
I think that's what Jordan said. Jordan wanted to do a fundraiser for me.
Why not?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. The only thing with that sort of stuff is that then you've got the expectations of other people hanging on you, you know, especially if people donate money and say, when are you going? When are you going? You know, and my whole plan was really with this last book and this last trip was my ideal was just to sneak off and don't tell people until you've done it.
Yeah.
You know, but at all, you know, I didn't get that chance.
But there's a great part right at the beginning of the book telling about a guy, what was it, 1909, was going to...
Oh, yes, Henry Charles Swan.
Yeah.
In Auckland. That was an amazing story.
He was going to sail off around the world and didn't.
Yeah, well, he told everyone, and it was like, you know, in the paper and things. Everyone waving him goodbye from Devonport, and he sailed out. So if he'd got around, he would have been like the second person ever to have done it.
Yeah.
But he's solo. He sailed out, and in the night, he turned around, and he went all the way up the harbour. No harbour bridge there, obviously, to Te Atatu.
Yeah.
And he went up the creek, Henderson Creek, and hid his boat there. And then he lived on it for years. But what had happened was he was a successful lawyer, apparently, and he'd bought that bit of land. So that was when Henderson was virtually, you know, it was a very tiny little town, you know. But he eventually got found out and things. But I mean, you know, sneak. But that was he didn't sneak away. So he waved, you know. It was I would ideally just to go. And then, like in the old days, you'd go and you just disappear over the curve of the earth because you didn't have the comms, you know. But now, you know...
You're in touch virtually all the time.
Yeah, and in a way I didn't really enjoy that.
Really? Because it must be so lonely to be out there and know that there is nothing apart from the steel grey ocean and the grey sky.
Yeah, it's very... Yeah, well, it was not really lonely. I'd say this solitude comes into it. I mean, it's just, you're busy because you're trying to keep the boat sailing, you know. It's all about keeping the boat moving. So your whole kind of awareness is, you're just tuned in sort of in a real elemental way to just keep that boat sailing because you know you're not going to get anywhere if you don't. And also, depending on what weather's coming, you know, so it's a big mind game really. So it wasn't really loneliness for me. That didn't come into it at all. In fact, in some respects, there was probably too much communication because I had a little satellite text, you know, thing, which is cheaper than satellite phone, you know. So I was texting people and I was getting weather forecasts and things like that. So there was constant communication going on, really. So I didn't really feel lonely.
The book is called Swirly World, Lost at Sea, written by Andrew Fagan. Fagan and the People is the band you should go and see. Anything you could do to help this man out, because I want to get him another boat. I think he should do this again. This is absolutely brilliant. It's compelling stuff.
Thank you.
I wish you all the best for the next adventure. And let us know how it goes.
Good on you, Nick.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.